Hello again, squaddies, and welcome back once again to the Fearless Slayer's Bestiary. And this time, we're hunting what is probably, outside of escalation, the single most dangerous behemoth. Yeah.
It's a winged horror that can see into your soul, break it without a thought, if you let it. Like the Rift Stalker, the Shroud can trap you within an Umbral hellscape. You'll have to use your ears. Keep your eyes sharp for any signs of the Shroud moving within the dark.
Bosun, Marcus has actually already told us. There it is. The Shroud. Now this thing has 16 attacks. We've already seen one with the Nightmare line right there, and the Flying Slam. You'll notice it's also got a lot of similarities to the Shrike, because of, you know, being a giant bird monster. There's the Nightmare line again. I'm not going to be able to talk about the individual attacks and tells during this, although there's a Clone Strike for you. It also does have a Claw Swipe. Again, a lot of its attacks are you'll see from the things you'd see from the Shrike. Oh, I'm so glad I was able to dodge that. What makes the Shroud especially dangerous, though, is, again, 16 attacks. That's actually a grounded slam and a wing swipe. Or, actually, I might... There's the claw swipes again. Wing spin. It can reposition. Another Nightmare line. Actually, it's not really in a line anymore. Huh, that's good to know. But yeah, what makes the Shroud especially dangerous is the Umbral nature. Marcus actually mentioned it in his little intro there that he does now. And in fact, that's its enrage. The Nightmare Shroud you see, very limited vision. That's the only way to spot the Shroud, is you look for its eyes. You'll also notice that it's very, very hard to hear in here. But that right there, the status effect that the Shroud gives you is also super dangerous. Corruption, is a long-term damage over time that will drain your health. The easiest way to get rid of it is to hit the Shroud. Cool thing is if you fight a Shroud in an escalation, you can actually hit either behemoth. And there's the Aether Charge, Nightmare Incarnate. Yes, I gave this one a name. Because this one... Oh, Death Ball. This is probably the single most dangerous attack in the entire game. It's actually better if you have two people attacking this thing, but I can probably handle it on my own since I'm using a radiant weapon. This ball, if it lives long enough, which it did not this time, it will explode in a rather large explosion. Every Slayer in the fight, every Slayer on the island, if that thing goes off, is reduced to 1 HP. Doesn't matter what your defense is, doesn't matter where you are. If the death ball goes off, you lose all but 1 HP. We're actually doing really good. This Shroud's already at half health. I'm actually standing in corruption. The Nightmare Sludge you see is what gives you corruption. It's also a bad slow. I mean, there's no such thing as a good slow when it's applied to you, so... Got it. That's actually that's the only time I've ever gotten an interrupt off on a Shroud. I've also got a little bit more of a stagger build for this fight. Because the Shroud is incredibly dangerous. We haven't seen even half. I think we've seen maybe half of what this thing can do. It's actually frozen, which is a saving grace for it. And we win. Good hunt, because that was really well done. Okay, I'm gonna have to talk a lot because we didn't actually see a lot of the attacks. I only got a B, but hey, we got an S+ for the team, so. Yeah, this is also, Shadow Dancing is one of the current hunt quest, hunt pass quest, because of that bastard right there. That's Thrax. We'll cover him after a while, but I have not even faced Thrax, so I don't know anything about him other than he's Umbral and a portal user. Alright, the way I'm going to do this now, because I remember last time... come on. That's... Where is the mastery? Ah, okay. I'm going to actually have this sitting on the Shrouds thing. But yes, like I said, the Shroud actually has 16 attacks. This counts the Aether Charge and the Enrage. The Aether Charge I already talked about a little bit. I call it Nightmare Incarnate because this thing is a monster. It has the exact same tail as the Strike's Enrage, where it kind of gathers itself up and then thrusts its wings out. This is the Strike's Enrage, because the Strike doesn't have an Aether Charge. This is instead the Shroud entering it. It gives a couple of new attacks I'll talk about, and a couple more of its regular attacks will spawn the Nightmare Sludge, which I will talk about in just a moment. That's not actually an attack, but it's an ability. The Enrage, we also saw, flies into the air and hovers for a second before firing off the Ether Burst. I think it also spins once. The Enrage does give a couple new attacks, but the biggest danger of the Enrage is the Nightmare Shroud that it creates. Yes, I named that attack after the fact that the Shroud is called a Shroud. But anyway, this will limit your vision to a very small area. You saw that, and your ability to hear gets a lot worse. Like there's a deadening of the sound. The best way to do this is kind of keep your eyes on a swivel. You saw me doing this a lot during that fight because the Shroud's eyes, it actually kind of grows a second set of eyes a little bit. The glow of its eyes will pierce the Nightmare Shroud. It's one of the easiest ways to spot the thing. Next up, the single most dangerous attack in the game. You saw me handle it on my own. We only saw it once. This is the Death Ball. The Shroud will stand up on its hind legs and just launch a purple and black and red sphere that goes out in a straight line and then stops after a bit. It'll pulse and start to pull shadows in. The sky will actually turn red a little bit if you watch. After it stops, it'll start to shrink. If it gets small enough is when it triggers. Normally, like I said, you'd want 2 Slayers to go after it. We managed to 1 because I'm using a level 12 Spire of Dawn. So I've got a level 12 Radiant weapon. That's really useful. Because if the sphere survives long enough, like I said, an enormous blast goes off, hits every Slayer on the island, and you're down to 1 HP. This can be used either during Enrage or Aether Charge. If it's used during the Enrage, you're a little screwed, because, let's be honest here, the Nightmare Shroud kind of makes it hard to notice. Next up, the Grounded Slam. You saw it a couple of times. Shroud stands up on its hind legs for a moment, raises both wings in the air, and slams its hands straight down, kind of like the end of the Flying Hammer from the Shrike, so it's just kind of a double axe handle smash. It comes out very quickly, so you gotta be prepared to move. The Shroud also moves back a bit when this happens, and there's also some Nightmare Sludge that pops up when it does this, even outside of the Aether Charge. If it's Aether Charged, it does create more. It does create more patches of the Nightmare Sludge. Next up, Flying Slam. We saw this a couple times as well. Fly up in the air, hover for a moment, legs hang down. After a couple of moments, it'll then, while it's in the air, it can actually move to change targets. So it's like the Flying Hammer of the Shrike, but it's a lot more mobile. It'll drop down, another double axe handle slam. This is a lot more mobile than the Shrike version, like I said, and it comes down slightly faster, so watch out. The timing on the dodge seems a little bit more lenient because of that speed, but don't count on that, just be ready to move. The Claw Swipe is the exact same as the Shrike, where it'll rear back and then swipe with its claws in alternating swipes. It can go up to 6 times, we saw that. It's a little more dangerous because it's faster, and it usually follows it up with the next attack, the Wing Spin. This attack is special because it doesn't really have a tell. It's kind of the end of the claw swipe. And it can also use it to finish off a couple others, but mostly the claw swipe. Now, the Shroud will extend its wings and leap a bit off the ground, spins in place before landing. Hold on, my file is not behaving properly. Yeah, it can also... This is also occasionally how it repositions. Next up, the backhand swipe, exactly the same as the strike, where it'll look over the shoulder, stand up, and just swing backward with one hand / wing. I'm not sure what you'd call those, but anyway. So, really easy to dodge, can't hit behind it, just be ready to move if it looks at you over its shoulder. Next up, the wing slash. The Shroud stands up, draws back one wing, and then does a quick backhand swipe with that wing, just like the strikes. Has a very large hitbox, or a larger than expected hitbox, and can hit behind and a bit to the side because of the wing being extended. If the feathers can touch if the feathers touch the area that the feathers touch the area you're standing in, congrats, you're gonna get hit. The wing swipe is one we did not get to see because it's usually used at the beginning of the second round. When the Shroud moves, when the Shroud retreats, where its second round starts is a little more dangerous, because at the new location there's going to be a couple of pools of the Nightmare Sludge on the ground. Once the second round starts, the Shroud will actually jump out of one of those and swipe with a wing at the Slayer that triggered it. So keep an eye on the sludge that you find in the second round. This is the only time when it's changing rounds. Is the only time you'll ever really see the wing swipe. It doesn't really pop out of those very often. The Nightmare Sludge, the one I've been talking about a lot and haven't really gone into. Several of the attacks the Shroud uses, think of the lava bombs from like the Hellion or the Charog, except these are made out of darkness. You see it a little bit under the portals from the Riftstalker as well. They stick on the ground for a long time. They will stick around for very long. Depending. It seems to have been nerfed a bit. And they apply a special debuff called Corruption that walk in it or start in it. It causes a very long-lasting damage over time effect and slows you down. The only reliable way to remove it, hit the Shroud. Hit a behemoth. The reason I have to add that second part in there is because, like I said, if you're fighting a Shroud in a tandem fight, in a 2 behemoth fight in escalations, and you get corrupted, hitting either one will work. Hit a behemoth, get rid of corruption, that's it. Next up, the Clone Strike. This is the same tell as the Shrike's Tornado, where it'll kind of gather its wings and then jump backward and flap. It does start up a little bit slower though. Instead of a tornado, it creates a Nightmare Sludge clone of itself that goes forward very quickly and can do some pretty good knockback. I think I've seen it apply corruption, but not sure on that. One attack we didn't get to see. Actually, I'll talk about that one in a minute. Next up, the Nightmare Line. And it's actually changed how this one actually kind of works. A little different than I originally found it. Draws back its arm, usually its right arm. And it usually makes a pose kind of similar to like the Hadoken from Street Fighter. It'll charge up for just a second and then make a throwing motion with the arm that was pulled back and up, as opposed to the secondary arm, which is usually lower. Creates 3... Excuse me. This will create 3 blobs of Nightmare Sludge at a medium distance. Usually they go in a straight line, but as we saw in that fight, it can also go in an arc in front of it. Basically, just avoid it, and don't step in the sludge, because stepping in the sludge will kill you, eventually. Next up, we got it has 2 enrage attacks and 1 Aether Charge specific attack. The one in the Aether Charge is the weird one. We didn't get to see it. It's what I call Nightmare Clone, because this thing is a nightmare. Like I said, look at this thing. Wouldn't want to meet this thing anywhere. But the Shroud will plop out a blob of the Nightmare Sludge on the ground in front of it. Over a few seconds, this will quickly morph into a smaller Nightmare Sludge clone of the Shroud. This clone can do everything the Shroud can, with the exception of the Death Ball. Every attack that the Shroud can do... Actually, that's not entirely true, except there's 3 attacks it can't do. The Enrage, the Aether Charge, and the Death Ball. Everything else I've told you, the Nightmare clone can do. And the other two things I'm going to tell you, depending on if the Shroud is enraged when it does it. Now, the thing about the clone is you can destroy it, and you probably should. It doesn't take a lot of effort. Similar to the Death Ball, you probably want 2 people doing this, unless one person's got a pretty high level radiant weapon. Next up, the next 2 are the enrage attacks. First off is Hunting Death. Yes, the name is based on the Hunting Raptor, just like the Shrikes. And it seems to work the same, where it'll do the last attack I'm going to talk about before it does this, where it'll do a charge, and it'll do its weird little scream, and the Shroud's scream is very strange. You'll recognize it pretty quick. Where it'll get down on all fours and charge forward, go a certain distance, and then do a quick spin around, and then launch itself into a... Oop. Damn it. I'll just leave it on this. And launch itself into the Hunting Death. One thing about this is that there's... you actually saw me do this. I got the boop on it. If it's Nightmare charged, it can also do this by launching a clone instead of as the lead up. The boop chance is still the same. Alright, so I know I talked a lot there, but again, the Shroud has 16 attacks. It's the most of any non-escalation behemoth, and I'm not even sure some of the escalation behemoths have more. Maybe Torgadoro, maybe Thrax. Like I said, I haven't actually faced down Thrax yet. But the Shroud is super dangerous. Go in, be prepared to take some hits. Just also be on your toes, because this thing is dangerous. If you enjoyed, feel free to drop a like on the video. You can also leave a comment down below if you have anything you'd like to say. And if you want to keep up me never missing my current series, then consider joining the squadron by subscribing to the channel. That does help me out, and I really do appreciate it. As for that, folks, I have been D. This has been an attempt to prepare you for the nightmare of the Shroud. Hopefully I did helped out some out there. Until next time, good night and good gaming.